County Justice that we will drop off some review copies for you down at Town Hall if you ever go in there. Shows some of the research we've done on the property over the years. So that's all I had. Thank you for the time. We really appreciate it and look forward to engaging with the town council.
Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks, Jennifer, and looking forward to talking further with you and the Historical Society, and Councilor Engelhardt, myself, and Manager Nada.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Bet.
Are there any other public comments? I just want to add that in my introductions, I left out Peter Squires, who was our town solicitor, and right there in front of Town Hall, manning the ramparts there. So thank you, Peter.
And it's daylight.
If there are no further public comments, we'll move on to item 3. This is the consent calendar and communications. Consent calendar are routine items which can be voted on as a group without discussion unless one of the councilors would like to pull off an item for further information and discussion. Tonight's consent calendar includes the minutes from the September 14th meeting, and we also have the annual renewal of Fiddling licenses for December 1st, 2020 through November 30th, 2021. And this is a little bit new for us. This is the first time we're using our e-licensing to renew our Fiddling licenses, all of which expire November 30th. And using our new e-licensing process for these license renewals, our ultimate goal is to allow businesses and business owners to apply for, pay for, and print their licenses all online. So we have on the consent calendar 37 applicants who have all applied to renew their Fiddling licenses, and they need a number of things to have the licenses renewed. One is a good standing certificate from the state tax board, and they also need to be inspected by the town of East Greenwich. All of our applicants have the tax collection certification. Some of them have not yet been inspected, but in conversation with our town clerk, Lee Carney, she is comfortable that we can go forward and vote to renew all of these licenses pending completions of inspections. So Lee, if you want to just make a comment on that, we can then go forward.
Sure. You want to take the items separately then and maybe get the minutes out of the way?
Yeah, we can do that. Why don't we do the minutes and then you can comment on the renewal of the licenses. And the licenses will all be done in one motion. What I would like to do though is there are some applicants who are also requesting some extension of their hours of operation. And so that will require an additional comment, and we'll have to have them come back to approve that, and our clerk will address that as well. So why don't we start with 3A, minutes from the September 14th, 2020 meeting. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
A motion from Councilor Donegan, seconded by Councilor Corenthal. All those in favor, say aye. Motion carries 4-0. I'm sorry, another oversight is one of our missing counselors, Councilor Michael Zarella, will be joining us a little bit later tonight. So that motion carries 4-0, and we'll then be looking at item 3B, which is all of the applicants for renewal of Fiddling licenses.
Okay, so yes, these are the folks that are in business as restaurants, but they do not carry alcoholic beverage licenses. So they've all applied, they've all gone through the vetting process. They are all current on their town taxes, which for victualling licenses are what we track. And I know that inspections have been going on since the summer, but I'm sure due to the COVID and all of that pandemic stuff, could have been a little bit difficult for the inspectors to get into all of them. But I know they're all in process. And it is early in the month. They all hold their licenses through the end of this month. So I'm confident that a motion to approve them subject to final inspections would be appropriate. There are 3 on there. If you clicked on the link for the listing of all of the licenses, that it was an oversight on my part, that do currently have extended hours, which means they're open 24 hours. And they've applied for that again. And to follow state law, that does require a public hearing with 3 advertisements in the local, 3 weeks of advertisements in the local newspaper. So since there's been no problems with these establishments having extended hours in the past, I would suggest maybe making a motion to, because there's going to be a gap now because I have to advertise for 3 weeks, which is going to get us into December. So I would just maybe suggest that council would approve the request for the extended hours with subject to final ratification at the public hearing. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yes, I wanted to ask our solicitor, should we make 2 motions, one for the standard group and then another for the group that needs extended hours?
Mark, my suggestion would be to just approve the group that you have, subject to the completion of the inspections. And because this is all the extended hours are renewals, and because the timely application's been filed, they'll be carried over until the advertisement is completed on the town's end. So if they can get their approval right away tonight for the ordinary hours, and because they have the timely application, they can continue to operate with the extended hours until they're heard on their renewal on December 14th.
Okay, so let's put that into a motion. Who would like to give that a try? Councilor Cornthal.
Sure, motion to approve subsequent to the final inspection of all the 37 applicants, if you want to say that.
Do we need any additional language for the extended hours, Peter? No?
Not at this point, because they have the timely application, they can continue to operate, and then you can address the renewal for extended hours once they come back to the public hearing.
Okay, so Councilor Cornthal has put a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Second.
Councilor Donegan seconds. Further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0 with Councilor Zarella absent at this vote. That was pretty easy, Lee.
Shocking.
Yes, Donegan.
I just wanted to comment that to anyone who's uninitiated, this seemed like a rather perfunctory quick vote. The amount of work that went in by Lee, even Lisa going back to the whole parking issue, the town man, I mean, it was, and Wendy, I mean, congratulations. This was an incredible lift. It took really almost 2 years, right, to get everything online, educate, outreach to the restaurant owners, to work with them, help them with their applications, deal with it in paper sometimes, and help. It was really a great effort to make something that tonight looked like it was easy, and going forward will be this easy. But thank you so much. Well done. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. That was seamless. And how many hours did we spend going over? And that's just us. I can't even imagine, Lee. Really super, super job.
Yeah, well done.
I really appreciate that, but your comments may be a bit premature because we haven't even gotten to the good stuff yet. That was just the victualling. The alcoholic beverages are a little bit further down the list. So
Lee, that alone,
you might want to take those comments back.
That alone took us a month last year.
We're trying. Thank you, though. Appreciate it.
Yes, well done, Lee. And I know what we have coming up, and there's still a lot of work ahead, but certainly we're on the right path. So that concludes consent calendar. We'll move on to item 4, which is reports and presentations. And we'll turn this over to our town manager, Mr. Nata.
Thanks, Dr. Swiger. What I would say is that all the time we just saved, I'll probably chew up in my report right now, Mike. I'll make up for it.
All right.
Thanks so much, Dr. Swager, members of the council. So I've got a couple of things I'd like to say tonight, and a couple of topics that have a little bit of meat to them. But what I would say is, for quite a while, I've been utilizing our present COVID pandemic and the actions associated with our response as kind of the structure to my reports, and they've really taken on really the entire structure, and then I've worked off of that. So to touch upon other more routine municipal items that we're accustomed to handling. So what I like to say is that this will probably be the last time that I do that. I'm going to continue, of course, because we're far from through the pandemic and our actions associated with that and the guiding of our operations here in town. But I will, I'll put that kind of as a secondary piece, and I'll continue to provide updated information of the utmost importance in a timely fashion. But we're gonna continue to move on and focus on many other municipal functions that we're engaged in, and start to bring those items back to the forefront. So tonight there's a couple things I want to do, and I think as accolades were just provided to Lee and others for really kind of working through the licensing process. You know, I'd have to say, Lee's going to provide another update in a couple of moments regarding the election and the process and certification and a number of other things dealing with the ongoing election and certification of the results. What I would say is I really need to take a moment to thank certain people individually. That the team that we have in the clerk's office, really, I think when you step back and balance the changes, really the significant changes that were made in terms of the election process this year, which I think many times can be taken for granted, were astonishing, the number, and we're still addressing many of them as we go as we continue on at this particular point. But I really need to reach out and thank Lee for her role as the town clerk, Elaine Vespia, who really is the driver behind managing all canvassing activities, and who really had to deal with a tremendous number of moving parts on a daily basis. Kind of their backup in the clerk's office, which helps deal with, because really everybody is cross-trained and deals with all the various issues in that particular office. But also I think it's important to thank Diane Potter and Nancy Phillips for all of the work and all of the calls and the many individuals that they spoke to in terms of navigating through that process. And then I think on behalf of the Board of Canvassers, I think a special thank you goes out to Noreen McGarry. It was probably an election like she's never seen before. So that particular core group, as well as many of the poll workers that we had manage all the sites, and everybody else that helped out with the early in-person voting and the mail-in ballots, and the work and the support that we received as a community from the State Board of Elections relative to, again, something that would easily be overlooked, the placement of our drop box over at the police station, which I think worked absolutely fantastic and was a nice support for our residents here. Really one of the only communities in the state that had their box located at the drop box located at a place other than town hall. So I just want to take that moment to personally thank that core group for doing what I thought was a fantastic job. And I really didn't have to handle most of those items, I'll be honest with you. Very few were that I was involved in that they took head on and took care of that with the State Board of Elections and other groups. So on behalf of my office, I want to say thank you to that group. Secondly, we just received, and I notified the I'm sorry.
Before you go on, Mark, I just thought it might be, if we're talking about that now, it might be appropriate to, I'd just like to echo that you know, the voting went off without a hitch. There were lines in and out of town hall for early voting. All the massive mail-in voting was fabulous. And the idea that we went out and you guys petitioned and were granted the right to move the drop box, because that didn't happen you have to go through a process. The idea that you guys thought about it, pulled it off and put it right in front of the police station, right in the police station parking lot. You could drive right through. If anyone had a news source that suggested to them that might be insecure in some way, having it in the police station was brilliant. Like, it really was reassuring. I know that when I drove through and dropped it in, I felt great about doing it. And just, you pulled off a great a wonderful process that was really challenging this time. So thank you.
Great. So, Mark, the other day I reached out to the council just on something that had surfaced that was brought to my attention early one morning from Senator Raptakis, and it was having to deal with Kent County Water Authority. So I'm sure the council and community members have seen that since then, Dave Simmons, their executive director, chief engineer, did provide for a press release to address a recent billing for customers of Kent County and some of the impacts. And you don't really need to move into the details here, but I think in the press release, it really covers the challenges that they've had in communicating with customers due to the outcry from clients and customers in terms of the calls that were being placed into their call center. The particular press release kind of highlights what I think many of us have seen over this past year and summer, dealing with a changed COVID daily routine, as well as a significant drought, that had a major influence. It really didn't matter where you were in the state of Rhode Island or who you purchased your water from, but there were significant increases in water usage based on people being at home much more often and also watering their lawns and their outdoor areas and plantings more because of the drought. So I just turn people's attention to take a look at that press release. I think it's online, and I think it gives a lot of good information. And then for people that have questions, I would definitely ask them to follow up with Kent County Water, and we're happy to help facilitate for them as well. We've got a lot of information that we can share with them as well. But there are a number of things that are happening in Kent County relative to meter changeouts, relative to other IT and system changes that they've made, which may in fact have caused certain anomalies to appear in certain bills. So I think it's worth for every resident, if they're interested or they're concerned about the bill that they received, to just follow up with Kent County. What I will do is in the report, the very first section that I provided for this meeting really covers in detail the governor's last executive order, and that would be Executive Order 20-91. So in that order, which I have a link for on the town site, there were actually 40 different components to it, where I'm highlighting just over 20 in this report. And I placed some of the key terms in bold so that people would kind of focus in on some of the significant changes. I'm just going to highlight a couple that I think are worthy of review by anyone that should have a question. And as I think we all know, the majority of these, as using the governor's words, are truly guidelines. I mean, she's seeking compliance, but I think in a supportive way, kind of contrary to an enforcement way. And based on how the rates of positive cases is increasing, that may or may not change in the coming weeks based on how the cases are managed or not. So I think, there's been a few questions that I've spoken to people about regarding the alert that was placed out, and I think that drew a lot of people's concerns, and that was about the advisory to stay at home after certain hours and before certain hours, really as an effort to try to rein some of the and tighten the controls based on certain mechanisms and certain gatherings that have been spreading the virus more predominantly around the state. In addition to that, the governor in this executive order does a nice job of refreshing everybody's memory regarding travel and quarantine regulations. It goes on to highlight the social gathering limit. So I would say there's no one point that is more confusing to residents across the state than it's the number of people that can gather for a particular type of function. So I think the first reaction that we get is when that number was reduced from 15 to 10 for social gathering, everybody that has a formal meeting, whether in government and otherwise felt that their limit, they wouldn't be able to meet because it was more than 10 people. So I think it's worth taking a moment, jumping onto the Restore Rhode Island website or the governor's site, taking a look at the executive orders and kind of refreshing your memory to your specific situation relative to how many people that you can have that meet. In addition to that, I've highlighted some modifications and some consistency regarding our restaurants and business community relative to gathering sizes. You know, I think as a general rule, most of them are regulated to an indoor capacity of less than 66% of building capacity, and or 10%, 1 person per 100 square feet, or a 10 by 10 area in a given business. And that's a general rule, but there are some modifications to that based on the individual facility or business that you're visiting. In addition to that, a number of other things that occurred just recently regarding indoor sporting facilities is great depth of information that's also included, as well as a re-emphasis on outdoor activity, outdoor gatherings, outdoor use, and expansion of business services in an outdoor area, as well as some specifics regarding specific types of businesses, really direct contact types of businesses, whether they're gyms or fitness centers, hair salons, barbershops, tattoo parlors, tanning parlors, and things of that nature, massage therapists. So I think it's worth kind of stepping back and taking a good look at that, just to familiarize yourself with some of the changes that have occurred. I think there were a couple of other modifications that were made regarding some of the changes in the restaurant industry regarding the curfew that was recently put into place. And so one way to negate the curfew, which, let me see if I have that right here, restricts access on certain days during the week until 10 p.m. and then other days till 10:30 p.m. And if you happen to listen in to the governor's review of that particular declaration, you can tell that it's a guide and really looking to have people winding down, not for takeout, but for in-person visiting and use at a particular business or restaurant. One thing that the governor implemented to help combat that was a special relief program for businesses that would be affected by the curfew. And this would be for direct grants to those businesses that qualify, anywhere from as low as a minimum of $2,000 up to a maximum of $10,000. That program is going to be managed through the Division of Taxation. It's using CRF funds, coronavirus relief funds. Those are federal dollars. But I think where they're going to be coming out with some more detailed information in the coming days is right on the Division of Taxation site. So I've got some links within this document that's on the town's website that people may want to look at. The next element of the report basically provides that support information that I've included for quite some time, and really would help direct individuals to the types of services and quality of services that I think they're looking for throughout the state of Rhode Island. In addition to that, there are a series of statewide updates that have been released over the past couple of weeks dealing with cybersecurity and ransomware, a little more detail regarding contact tracers, some issues that are being addressed with off-road vehicles, as well as some updated testing information. This next topic, I really like to pause for a moment, because I think kind of where we are in terms of the town's interaction with the Chamber of Commerce and our work with the Take It Outside initiative, which has really been based right here on Main Street due to the fact that many of our businesses here on Main Street don't have property surrounding them that would afford them the easy opportunity to expand outside their front door. So although our Take It Outside initiative, which, as the council and community are aware, was a cumulative effort of a round 1 and round 2 grant application totaling approximately $100,000, we are winding down on the expenditure of that full $100,000. I've included in prior reports the detailed list of the budgets that were included and the types of equipment and services that the town and the chamber engaged in to support our business community. So the first phase that we entered into, and I'll make this brief, was Main Street closure, a portion of Main Street on Sunday afternoons. So that program started off a bit rocky, I will say, in the fact that we did not initially receive RIDOT approval to actually close Main Street. Main reason being that it's Route 1, it's a numbered federal highway. So that in and of itself draws and brings to light significant regulatory state and federal restrictions on what you can and can't do with the roadway. So, but what we did do is by engaging various state officials in a fairly comprehensive manner, over the first couple of weeks that we were granted an opportunity to try it out, to manage it, to reroute traffic, to work with our business community and local residents, to evaluate any issues that would arise with transportation, commercial transportation through this area. I think it was very clear very quickly that the town and its staff, made up of a lot of different groups, and not just my office in the chamber, but clearly our DPW staff, our police department, and others, our fire department assisted, as well as many other supports that were very helpful in making that happen. So we ended up having 8 weeks of Sundays. So I think all generally successful in terms of providing a safe environment. But what I don't think people realize is that, on a weekly basis, we were engaging other businesses that felt that they may be slightly being negatively affected by the closure, that people didn't feel comfortable traveling through the center of town. We have other residents that live right at the epicenter in the middle of the community. On Sunday afternoons, they were having difficulty. So as we had talked about it at prior meetings, we continue to evolve and modify travel in and around the center of town to make it work. And I think that everybody at the end of those 8 weeks agreed, including all of the state agencies involved, is that worked really effectively here. And that it wouldn't be an outright rejection in the future, but it would be something that we could talk about. So when that concluded, we started to look to ways to address RIDOT's concerns, and that was to what could we do to provide increased capacity, outdoor capacity for select restaurants that actually wanted to push through the fall and into the winter by not closing the roadway, so we didn't negatively affect anybody else. And so as part of our Commerce RI and Take It Outside applications, we elaborated in those documents the fact that we were purchasing barricades to expand outdoor use. We highlighted what the program would be. And when we concluded the 8 weeks, we transitioned to that program, which you can see outside Town Hall today. So for the past week with 70-degree weather, I would have to say that any business, anybody that drove down Main Street, they absolutely reaped the benefits of us being able to create an environment that was really indicative of what you would see in various European countries, that you would have access on the roadway, on the shoulders of roads, outside, in the right-of-way, outside certain businesses. And I think we've heard that echoed from all of the businesses that it worked out far better than they ever anticipated. And I think for many people that I've spoken to who had the opportunity to frequent any of those restaurants, really, because of the weather was fantastic as well, really just thoroughly enjoyed the experience. And I'm bringing this up tonight because it's all coming to an end in the early morning hours tomorrow. So in continuing to gauge RIDOT on this particular phase of the plan, it was deemed that it would not be permitted for us to continue with use of the parking lane shoulder. So this past week, I was in communication with the director of Department of Business Regulation, the Commerce Secretary, Stefan Pryor, and Peter Alviti, the director of DOT. And we were engaging in a conversation, really a trade-off of ideas and concepts that we may think we might be able to pull together, similar to how we did with the road closure. And at the conclusion of that conversation, it was clear that the parties involved, mainly through RIDOT, were more supportive of a flat-out road closure than to continue with the structure that we have today. So as successful as it was, as disappointed as I am in those business communities and the Chamber of Commerce and others are that this is going to be short-lived while we still continue to push through some good fall weather, we're going to have to wrap that up in the morning. So you'll be seeing the barricades removed from Main Street. And, as we concluded that conversation, we expected it to continue. And I think that it's such a valuable addition to Main Street that if there is anything that we can do on a go forward basis as we look to the spring or future years, that I think we'd like to put this on the front burner of something we'd like to talk about, especially when it comes time to reconstruct Main Street, when we're looking at in sidewalking improvements, street improvements, crosswalk improvements. Are there ways to create any areas where it can safely be done, if that's something that the council and the community are interested in? And I would really hope that we hear from everybody in the coming weeks and months to see, so we can kind of assess the level of interest that might exist in terms of us starting to move in that direction. Actually had a fantastic call on Saturday with Senator Valverde, who called me to follow up on the information that we had put out on this particular issue. She had reached out to see if there was anything that she could do on the town's behalf in this respect. So I was able to spend some time on the phone with the senator and kind of bring her up to speed as to the background and some of the interactions that we've had with state officials. And I think part of the point, and then I'm going to conclude, is the reason why we have such, just disappointment in terms of the decision that was made is due to the fact that we think there's unfortunately been just some inconsistent messaging, right? So the messaging with Take It Outside and DBR and Commerce RI is we need to support our business community and we need to get them outside. So we really felt very strongly that we had kind of dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's in terms of providing that environment. And plus, we would contest the fact that by having barricades blocking off the breakdown lane actually makes it safer than just having a 4-inch curb, where if I happen to lose control on Main Street and I work right or left, at least I'm going to engage an interlocking weighted series of appropriate road barricades that are approved for that use, rather than either run into a vehicle or actually work my way right up onto a curb. So I think, keeping all of those things in perspective, I guess we were expecting more, and maybe the federal regulations or other state regulations were a little unmanageable for us in this particular application. So I think as we go forward, we're going to want to continue to have that dialogue. And I think the other piece to it is that we kind of see it as an additional obstacle that others are not facing. So the fact that we have a state road in the middle of our commercial district, to us, is now a disadvantage, where other communities have a local municipal roadway and they can do as they please on that roadway, or a non-numbered federal road or state road through their community. So we seem to be in the unfortunate situation where we're facing some added regulatory burden that others are able to work around fairly easily. So at a difficult time. And as you can see, I'm a strong advocate for our business community, the chamber. I really appreciate the work that Steve Lombardi and Amy Moore have done on their behalf as well, and the support from all our other departments who made this happen. Many that have already been mentioned: police, our fire department, our public works department, parks, and others that all came together to really make this work. So I'm gonna conclude there, except on that particular item. Happy to circle back with any questions. There are a few things that I listed on other business at the end that I would like to briefly comment on a conversation that Councilwoman Engelhardt and I had regarding the 2 studies that the council has expressed interest in over recent months, and that would be our waterfront study and our parking study. So that conversation, I pushed out a very brief informal update to the council as to where we kind of stand in terms of those 2 studies, which are both critically important to the community. Is that we've got a couple of different things and moving pieces that are affecting our ability to move forward at the moment. So the first, let's take the waterfront study. So this is a study that is funded, and we've placed those funds in a capital reserve so that we would protect them on a go-forward basis. So we've got 2 challenges. So one of them is that we're going to talk about in a few moments when we get to new business and we talk about our quarterly update in terms of our finance report and overall budget status. So we still don't have sufficient information, really any information regarding a state budget, fourth stimulus package, or kind of where we stand. So we're really strongly recommending, not only on the waterfront study, but on many other capital projects, is that we are standing down until we have clear direction and know that the community has ample funding to move forward on a study like that. So that would be part one. The second piece to the waterfront study is the question of whether or not it's an appropriate time. Let's take, for example, this coming summer. So clearly we don't want to conduct a waterfront study for activity in the off season. You want to conduct it and have a consultant on board who can work right through the full season and take a look at how property is presently used, public and private. You want them to evaluate our waterfront activities. You want them to evaluate our commercial businesses. You also want to evaluate impacts on local residents. And I'm not sure that there's a better time to do that, except for when our business community and our activity in the waterfront is kind of back to where it was about a year ago. And I think that would give any consultant, as well as our review of our staff and the council, a good ability to really effectively balance all those interests on a go-forward basis. So those are two of the pieces that we would recommend we kind of stand down at this particular moment on the waterfront study. The parking study has not been funded yet, although that should never really preclude the council from its authority to be able to reallocate funds. So if the council were to say tomorrow that you felt that it was a priority going into next summer and that it absolutely had to occur, clearly we could reallocate funds. We would bring back proposals to the council for you to redirect existing funding to be able to fund that study. But I think at the pace of the COVID pandemic, its impact on the economy and the economic impacts we're probably going to see over the next year, I think the question is whether or not next summer will be truly a normal summer for economic activity and then parking impact on Main Street and the surrounding residential and commercial areas. Or may we be in a cycle where we may have to wait, and I hate to say this, another cycle to get us to the point where we can budget those funds appropriately and be ready for a full-blown parking study with all of the historical parking pressures and challenges that we were talking about at length about a month ago. So I'm gonna stop there. There are a couple of other things in that report. One thing I'm gonna mention, and I'll be happy to answer any questions, is Lee is gonna be reaching out to all of you. Next month is incredibly the month where we have our initial budget hearing with the school committee. So that's right around the corner. And we can talk a little bit more about that when we talk about finances in our quarterly report. But that's going to be something I recommend everybody take a look at that December calendar at some point, and based on how the dates align and based on when the council's first meeting is and when school committee meetings are, is we may want to get an early start on trying to plan that particular date, because I think it's going to be a critical time for us to do an additional financial update, as well as for the school department to provide a financial update as well at that time, once we get into the middle of December. So at that point, Dr. Swiger, I think I'm going to stand down for a couple of moments to see if there are any questions.
Rainu, I thought I saw your hand up there, Councilor Engelhardt.
Yeah, no, so I actually, first of all, I'd like to thank you once again. The report is excellent, and I highly recommend that everybody reads it. But I was curious, I mean, when it comes to the Sunday afternoon restaurant situation, did Commissary, were they also pushing? I mean, we cannot be the only town that is, I mean, now that you say that, it makes sense that we have a federal road in the middle and that there are different rules for us, but certainly there must be other towns. And Commissary, are they at all helpful in this situation, or was it just you and DOT on that?
Yeah, no, I would say we have a very good relationship. You know, we have clearly a partner relationship with our state agencies that we absolutely need to maintain. And because I'm expressing disappointment, I don't want you to think that we don't still have those relationships. So Liz Tanner, the director of the Department of Business Regulation, was instrumental in facilitation of communication. I think that many of the state and municipal officials would agree that these are such challenging times, and at times communication has suffered because of that, because we've all been so busy dealing with community and statewide issues. But Liz was fantastic in bringing a group together, have communicated on a number of occasions with personnel from Commissary, as well as the secretary himself, Stefan Pryor. Director Alvidi, I will say, was instrumental in and actually is part of this process. Although one thing I failed to mention is that DOT is now supportive, because it was so successful, of the town exercising a request to close the street again. So I am hesitating to do that because of the patience and what the residents and businesses did who were not favorably affected. they kind of suffered through those 8 weeks, and we kept interacting with them. Steve Lombardi and I, as well as Amy Moore and others, were engaging them on a constant basis, just trying to balance local interests. So for me today to then say, well, we're going to close multiple days a week, if the weather permitting, Friday, Saturday, Sunday for the next couple of months, I think would be probably too much of a price to pay. So I will say they were very, very helpful, but they have put that offer on the table. They put 2 offers on the table. One was to be able to close the road again. And the other reason why we hesitate to do that is a very costly proposition for us to man it appropriately with law enforcement officials, as well as our DPW staff. We were averaging anywhere from $3,000 to $4,000 per Sunday. We were able to recover close to half of those funds through the Take It Outside grant initiative. And then the town is contributing the other half. But to go forward on that basis, it's a staggering cost I think we're really not prepared to address. So I did let DOT know that as much as we appreciated the closure, we might consider it on a periodic basis, once in a while. The other thing that they were willing to do was allow us to push the barricades to the curb. And by pushing them to the curb, it would make the sidewalk that much safer to use. Right now, you have restaurants who put tables right to the curb. And even if you have a large vehicle and you're pulling in, sometimes the front of your vehicle extends over the curb, right? So, and then you're opening doors in and out of that area. So DOT also mentioned that they would be willing to allow putting the barricades right to the curb in select areas. We did engage our chamber and our restaurants, and they felt it was more of a priority to provide for the parking and to remove the barricades. So in the morning, we're going to be removing them. But so needless to say, again, Renew, as disappointed as we are in the decision, we understand it. It's based in public safety. That's what the federal and state regulations are. We were just hoping in these times for a little more creativity and maybe a little more engagement and a little more risk mitigation that we might be able to put our heads together and come up with to satisfy that problem instead of quickly having to remove the barricades in early November. And our request really only included going through New Year's. So after New Year's, we would have pulled them in anyways when the weather really turned. So we're going to continue the dialogue, and we'd appreciate any input of the council and the community. And we're going to try to come up with ways in which we might be able to mitigate. It might require an investment, but I think it added an incredible feature that people got a little taste of here on Main Street, and I think they enjoyed that. So
yeah, no, I was going to say the people that I know that attended, they had great things to say about it. They were very positive, and I went to just maybe 2, but it was well done. So thank you.
Yeah,
great. Thank you for that.
You bet.
Councilor Donegan.
Andy, the objection to allowing the extension, putting the barriers in sort of taking a parking lane out for use, was that related to federal traffic flow or state traffic flow, or more just safety?
I think it was more safety. So I received 2 correspondents on this, Mike, from DOT. One of them was from Bob Rocchio. Bob's been in the department for quite some time. He's the chief engineer and chief of staff of RIDOT. And the second correspondence I received was from John Igliozzi from their legal office regarding some of the implications. But Bob was able to articulate kind of the points that they were focusing on in their decision. So basically, his response was basically a denial of our request. Well written. He focused on the fact that the barricades can deflect. So again, a public safety issue. If a car hits it at a certain speed, that debris from a car crash can become a projectile. So now we're moving individuals closer to where there could be an accident in the roadway and have debris versus being on the sidewalk. It talked about by installing the barriers along the shoulder, individuals who are driving might be uncomfortable. It's kind of like when I drive over the Jamestown Bridge every day, they have same barriers on the shoulder, and you have a tendency to gravitate towards the middle of the road, to gravitate more towards the center line for some individuals who aren't comfortable driving as close to them. The difference is on the Jamestown Newport bridges, we have people driving 70, 80 miles an hour, and here on Main Street, we're driving 10 to 20 miles an hour. So it's a little bit of a difference. And then the fourth item was that this plan did violate Federal Highway Administration rules. So I think it was more of a rules-based objective in concert with maybe not enough time to study the public safety aspect of it and how we could mitigate that further. And I think our effort probably should be focused on risk mitigation, and then also whether or not there is any movement possible with the federal highway regulations or not. So I think that's where we're going to have to spend our time if the council's interested in looking at this in the future.
So Andy, it would seem that on the first issue, that's more of a practical, what kind of barriers would work? Because remember, those same people can go right up against the curb, drive over the curb.
Yes.
And hit our people on the sidewalk.
Yes.
You know, so we'll have to see if we can get over that one. On the issue, there's a legal question, right, about how much you can restrict flow on a federal highway.
That's correct.
Obviously, they got over it on Sundays by
They did.
closing it. Closing it seems about the most restrictive you could do. So either A, they're willing to say, fine, feds, come and get us, or they found an exception in the law or something. So since we're not, I would think that we could probably work on that legal issue and they could take some risk. I doubt very much that the federal Secretary Chow is unlikely to be coming to East Greenwich to address the state of Rhode Island's problem with the traffic flow. So It probably is more the first, but are you suggesting that you're going to put a team together to try to work through this between now and next season?
Yeah, I'd like to be able to do that unless I hear any objection to kind of moving in that direction to at least investigate what options might be available.
No, I would strongly recommend that we do that and also engage our state reps in that process.
Yes.
And then Andy, if as that goes forward, I don't know if Mark, Peter, I don't think we need a vote of the council to ask Andy to do that, but if Peter?
No, you wouldn't need a vote.
No? Okay. All right, but I would support that. I think we should do that. That's a good priority.
Yeah.
Councilor Cornthal.
Yeah, Andy, I have a question for you. I know you said that it's costly to shut down the street.
Yes.
Would our businesses prefer that the street be shut down or prefer the way with the barriers?
So that's a really complicated question because it depends on where you block it off and then also how you reroute traffic. So I think and it's also parking. So we used a very small area from approximately Bedford to King Street. So you could extend it farther, but then you push the public farther out, you affect more residents, and we were still rerouting at King and Division, and also at First and London, really the major thoroughfares to be able to get either east or west around the center of town. We were trying to keep people from entering into the historic section of the main street where the side roads are very, very narrow, all residential areas. And that was one of the reasons why off of Duke and Exchange, we were looking at ways to reroute in one way, just to free up some of that pressure. And that was really the only place that we saw traffic buildup. So to answer your question, I think it really comes down to where you actually draw the line. And some businesses, I think rightfully so, where people drive to their business. Others are comfortable parking and walking in. I think it depends on the nature of each business. But we saw a little bit of both. Some greatly benefited and some didn't quite as much.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing.
Other questions for the manager? So thank you for all the work you've done on this, Andy. I know you've left no stone unturned, and certainly the consensus of the council, I think, is to have you continue those discussions. If you need further support from the council, we'd be happy to assist you.
Sure.
If there's no other comments, then we'll move on to agenda item 5, which is our public hearing. So Carol, get ready to go. This is the annual renewal of alcoholic beverage licenses with ancillary licenses for the period of December 1st, 2020 through November 30th. I'm sorry, Lee?
Unless you didn't want to talk about the election, we can continue.
Lee, I have you page. I'm sorry, I went to the next page. So let's back it up and
Okay,
go to item 4B, report from the town clerk on the general election.
okay. I have to do a lot of talking tonight, so
That's right, you're up next also.
let me get it all in there. Okay, so I have a long page of notes. So here is what I would like to report on from the election. And just overall, I think it went very well, considering it was a historic event as far as voter turnout was concerned. I did a little quick math today, and I estimate there's approximately about a 78% voter turnout townwide, which is unheard of. The backup that I provided for the agenda came right off the Board of Elections website, and it's they are unofficial, I will say unofficial statewide and town results. And you can visit the website or check out the backup, and the results are presented by precinct and also by ballot breakout. So you can see votes that were done at the polling place and votes that were done by mail ballot, as well as votes that were done during the emergency in-person period here at Town Hall. My total on that, I think, was like 88,552. So it was a lot. During the day, I did go out and visit all of the 5 polling locations. I have to say that I found the poll workers were all very upbeat and happy. You could definitely feel a team spirit going on between the groups. We've had nothing but positive feedback from them. And these are people, again, I know we've thanked them before, which I can't thank them enough, but they, sorry, I think Ray New is stuck. Wendy, if you could check Ray New's status and pull her back over, thank you. These are people that in our community, there she is, that stepped up to serve during a pandemic. So it goes without saying how much that is appreciated. I think the campaigning was done very respectfully and professionally. When I drove around, I did not see anything that was overly concerning. There were no signs down Avenger Drive, which was great. So I saw a lot of kids out there. It was with their parents, and it was just really well done. I felt really good about it. So overall, I'm really happy with the day. The big topic now is the path to certification. So here's a little kind of rundown of what I have gleaned from several emails from the Board of Elections. So tomorrow, November 10th, is the deadline for people to file for recount by 4 o'clock. Also, tomorrow is the deadline for them to finish up provisional ballots, and also deficient ballots. And those are ballots that did meet the deadline, but the board at the state level is having a problem with maybe a signature. And all of those voters were sent a letter, and if they did provide a phone number, they actually are receiving phone calls as well. So that's going to be going on tomorrow. Then we've got Wednesday is the holiday. Thursday, the 12th, by 4 o'clock is the deadline for military and overseas ballots to be processed. They are allowed to actually fax or email their ballots. Friday, it's Friday the 13th again, great. Friday or Monday, the 16th, those deficient ballots that we talked about will be counted and then added to the results. Then the week of November 16th, the Board of Elections will be conducting recounts, if any are filed. And that's going to be happening at the Pastore Youth Center, 155 Gansett Avenue in Cranston. And then let's see, the week of Thanksgiving, by state law, they are required to have a risk limiting audit, and that will be conducted the week of Thanksgiving. So that puts us for the week of November 30th. The board is planning on meeting that day to certify the election. So end of the month is the best date we're looking at right now for certification. So I would expect in maybe future meetings, we'll start talking about swearing in of new officers and what the inauguration might look like in a pandemic. So more to come on that. I just want to wrap up and echo what Mr. Nada said about the staff in my office. Diane Potter and Nancy Phillips and Elaine Vespia. I know it looked great from the outside, but you know, it was stressful and it was really hard. And I'm not gonna hide that. I'm glad that it looked well. That's because my staff is awesome. I mean, the amount of phone calls that came in, you know, in-person visits, we had to handle so much paperwork that came from who knows where, you know, so there was a risk of exposure that we were all willing to accept, and we were careful about it, and nothing has happened, thank God. But, you know, we are public servants, and that's what we are here to do. And all the while juggling everything else that goes on in the office. I'm just really proud of them, and I could never have, you know, it's never a one-person job in that office. It can be very demanding. So it wasn't easy, but they handled it, you know, with grace and dignity and a sense of pride, which I just wanted to publicly acknowledge. So thank you to all of them.
Thank you, Lee. You know, I think you mentioned this pride in public service. I think that's just such a great concept, and it really is so rewarding to hear that and see our staff displaying that. And I know that I've texted you on nights and weekends, and I always get a text right back, and it is that dedication to public service. So thank you again. Renu?
I just wanted to say thank you. It was, I was at Hannaford as usual, and it was really well done, and everybody worked so hard, all the poll workers. There was a lot of campaigning by kids. Everybody was so involved, and I know I saw you, I saw Lane, I know I saw Nancy and Diane around. It was great. So thank you so much for your work. It was really, I know it had to be stressful, especially with all that's going on. So thanks again.
Councilor Cornthal?
Yeah, I know that there were almost, 6,000 people, right, who voted either early in person or by mail. That's unheard of. And I was here a couple of times in town hall. It was quite busy. And then I also went around polling places. It was terrific. I also have to thank you and Elaine. I had somebody call me and ask, I don't know even what the question was anymore, but you handled it right away. I sent a text, and it was handled like immediately. So really, all of you and your whole staff did a really outstanding job under very incredibly horrible circumstances. So congratulations and thank you all very, very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Councilor Donegan?
Yeah, Lee, thanks so much to you, Elaine, and the whole team. It was flawless, and really, it was great to see you guys own it, because we too, you know, aren't really sure how this gets done. You know, this was a novel circumstance. It seemed like every ball was in play. There were no shortage of critics from all sides waiting, right? And so thanks so much. I know you guys had to go out in public a lot, and the challenges that, you know, poses. So that was great. I also wanted to comment that, having gone around to the polling places, it seems like our community and even the candidates learned a little bit from kind of the last election. You're right, there wasn't as much of that signs and Avenger Drive and in the medians and all of that. That didn't really show up, at least on election day, that much. There wasn't a lot of barging in within the white circle that's the setback to somehow claim the law is this or the law is that. in my experience, although we didn't really have any challengers, I was there holding signs next to candidates who were opposing the candidate I was supporting, and everyone was very cordial. It was just a very different tenor at a time when you would have expected temperatures to run even hotter than the last election. This time, at least in my experience, you guys had set the stage. The expectations were clear. The Board of Elections, you guys met and laid out, everybody laid out what the rules were. And I just think that we've learned something as a community. People did this in a far more cordial way. And a lot of it was that you set up the structure and the rules that everybody understood ahead of time. And I thought it was just well done by our community. And it started with the way you guys laid it out and set it up. So thank you.
Lee, you had mentioned we had about a 78% turnout rate of registered voters. What was the total number of voters? I think you said it was 8,000, did you say? What was the number?
8,500.
So all I did, Mark, today was really quickly, I went on the Board of Elections website. I just wanted to get some quick numbers. And I just looked under East Greenwich, and then I broke it out by ballot breakout. And I just calculated the presidential race, the 7 candidates for the presidential race. So for the poll, at the polls, I came up with 2,186 votes. People voted for president. Mail ballots, I got 3,257. And then in person, this is just astonishing, at in here at Town Hall was 3,109 in this building.
Lee, what was the second number? The
mail ballot?
Yeah, we had
2186. Polls was 2186, mail ballot was 3257, and emergency in person at Town Hall was 3109. So almost, almost kind of even.
And how many registered voters do we have in town?
I said around 11,000.
Okay.
Great. Well, thank you again. Looking forward to the next election, Lee. In
can't wait.
2022, it's just around the corner.
Tell me, piece of cake.
So now, unless I see other waving hands, I will go to item 5 on the public hearing. Thank you all for keeping me on track here. So Lee, you're going to have an opportunity to shine again here on item 5, the public hearing. This is a renewal of our alcoholic beverage licenses with ancillary licenses as applicable through November 30th of 2021. So this is interesting. We're going to go through the licenses, the alcoholic beverage licenses by class. There's, I think, 4 or 5 different classes of alcoholic beverage licenses. Some of these applicants have additional licenses that they're applying for, and that is noted on the agenda. And what we're going to do is have our town clerk let us know in each class which applicants have a completed application. We can then take all of those applicants as a group and approve their application. Those who have an incomplete application, we will continue the public hearing for those applicants until November 23rd. So we'll start with Class A licenses. This is for packaged beverages, packaged alcoholic beverages, so liquor stores, package stores. We have 3 applicants, Frenchtown Liquors, Savory Grape Wine Shop, and Thorpe's Wine and Spirit. So we'll have the clerk go through this. There will be an opportunity for the public to comment if they have any comments on any of these applications. So Lee, what's the review of the Class A licenses?
So as of right now, I just wanted to start off by saying that we've had about 25 out of 45 or so actually go in and start the renewal process using the new online portal that you spoke about earlier. So we've got about 57% of them on board, which is fantastic. I was hoping to have at least 10 of them ready for you. Well, I would like to have all of them ready for you, but it's complicated and it's taking a little bit more time. And thank you to Wendy again for helping me through this, working offline with a lot of these folks. For obvious reasons, I'm only one of me, so I had to pull in my backup. So they've all been reviewed and vetted by the town. They do include, as we go down the list, some of the ancillary licenses. So I have 5 to offer you today, 5 out of 25. The other ones are very, very close, and probably, I bet by the end of the week, some of them will be ready, so we'll have a big list for you at the next meeting. But as of tonight, I have nothing for approval in Class A.
Okay, so Lee, if we want to take it one class at a time, is that okay with you to do it that way?
That's fine by me, yes. Yep.
Okay, so we'll need a motion to continue all of those applications to our next meeting. Before that motion, is there any of our attendees who have a comment on any of the applications, Class A? The list here is short. The other classes, there's quite a few applicants, so you'll have to refer to the town council agenda. All the applicants are listed there.
Thank you.
So if anybody has any comments on the Class A license applications, please raise your hand on the Zoom platform. If you're on the phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. So I see no public comment. Do any of the councilors have comments on these continuance of these licenses? If not, we'll ask for a motion to continue the Class A licenses to the next meeting and extend the public hearing until November 23rd.
So moved.
I have a motion from Councilor Donegan. I think I saw Councilor Corenthal wave a few fingers there. So I will, we have a motion and a second. We'll take the vote. All those in favor, say aye. But by showing hands raised, all the councilors present vote aye. Motion carries 4-0. We now go to Class BV. This is for restaurants with full alcohol, wine, beer, and spirits licenses. So, Ms. Carney, how do we look in this category?
We are looking okay. I have 2 to offer. That would be the End Zone Pub and Grill with their located at 5835 Post Road, with their ancillary licenses being victualling, entertainment, jukebox, mechanical devices, and a pool table, and also the extended hour on New Year's Eve. I would also offer up Low Key Cafe with their ancillary licenses of victualling, entertainment, and extended hours, and the extended hour on New Year's Eve. But I would just like to speak a little bit about Low Key Cafe. They're not actually open yet. This is one of the ones that you approved as a brand new license last January. New licenses are actually can be granted and not issued for a full year in order for them to get their COs and get their licensing and their regulations taken care of. So even though they're not open, they have still been granted the license, and therefore we must have it renewed in order for them to carry it through the next year. I have been talking with the applicant quite a bit, Zach Flanders, and he is working very hard to be open. He has until like the second week of January to become open. So we had to include him in the renewal process. So that one's ready to go. So those are 2 for Class BV.
Okay, so for those 2 applicants that are ready for approval tonight, is there any public comment on those applications? Seeing no public comment, any council comments? If not, Michael, did you raise your hand? No?
No, I didn't.
Okay. If not, then I'll look for a motion to approve the completed applications for Class BV licenses.
So moved.
I have a motion from Councilor Donegan and seconded by Councilor Corenthal. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries 4-0. All the present councilors voting aye. So now we need to continue the remaining licenses that are listed in the town agenda. These are incomplete and will be continued to the next public hearing on the 23rd. Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment on any of these Class BV licenses as listed in the agenda? Seeing none, look for council comment. And now I'd look for a motion to move these forward to next public hearing. Counselor Corinthal, and seconded by Counselor Engelhardt. Is that motion sufficiently?
To continue the remaining Class BVs to
Yeah.
November 23rd, that's fine, yep.
Okay. All those in favor, raise your hands. Aye, I see 4 raised hands by all the counselors, so we are moving along to the next class of alcoholic beverages. This is BV Limited, so these are restaurants who are looking just for beer and wine licenses, along with some ancillary licenses as well. There's only 3 in this class: Pizza Heaven, Tia Mateo, Greenwich Bay Gourmet, and Victor's Kitchen. Lee, what's the status in this category?
I have one that is ready for full approval, and that's the Tio Mateo's Greenwich Bay Gourmet application.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Would anyone like to comment on Tia Mateo's application? Any council comments? If not, I'll look for a motion to approve Tia Mateo's alcoholic beverage license with Fiddling.
So moved.
Counselor Donegan, seconded by Counselor Corinthal. Raina, you're at the bottom of the screen, so I don't always see your hand go up. It should go. So all those in favor, say aye. Motion carries 4-0. Now we need a motion to extend the public hearing for the remaining 2 applicants, Victor's Kitchen and Pizza Heaven, until November 23rd.
So moved.
Counselor Engelhardt, seconded by Counselor Donegan. Any public comment? Any council comment? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. We now move to Class BT. This is for hotels. The Greenwich Hotel is the only applicant in this category. How are they doing, Lee?
Very close, but not quite. So we're gonna have to continue that one to November 23rd, please.
Okay, public comment for the Greenwich Hotel. Council comment? So we'll look for a motion to continue their application.
So moved.
Counselor Corinthal, seconded by Counselor Donegan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. We move to the Class C licenses. This is for businesses that do not have a kitchen but can serve prepared or reheated items for food for sale. And this is the Regency Cigar Emporium. They're the only applicant in this category. What's their status, Lee?
They are ready to be approved. They are fully compliant with that application. So a motion to approve Regency Cigar.
Okay, any public comment on Regency Cigars application? Council comment? We'll look for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Counselor Corinthal,
I'll second.
and seconded by Counselor Engelhardt. All those in favor?
Aye.
My motion carries 4-0. This brings us to Class D. This is for private clubs, and we have the Greenwich Club, East Greenwich Veterans Firemen's Association, and the East Greenwich Yacht Club. I think they're the only ones in this category. Is anybody ready for approval, Lee?
Yes, the East Greenwich Yacht Club is ready for approval.
Okay, public comment. Anyone wish to comment on the Yacht Club's license? Any council comments? So we'll look for a motion to approve the license for this applicant.
Yes, motion to approve the yacht club.
Councilor Corinthal makes the motion. Seconded by Councilor Engelhardt. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries 4-0. We now move to Class T. This is for theaters. Alcoholic beverages served during the events put on by theaters. And we only have one applicant here. That's the Greenwich Odeum. Is there any public comment on the Odeum's application?
I think we'll need a motion though to continue the rest of the Class Ds. I'll just assume that we've done that if some 2 people want to
I'm
raise their
sorry.
hand.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm getting into the groove here, going a little too fast. So
I'm rolling with you. I like
we
it.
do need the motion to continue the remaining applicants. So someone make that motion? Councilor Corinthal?
Move to continue the other
Seconded
2.
by Councilor Engelhardt. Public comment on continuing those applications for the Fireman's Club and the Yacht Club. Hearing none. All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. So we'll move back to the Greenwich and their status.
They're close as well, but not quite. So a motion to continue their application until November 23rd, please.
Okay. Public comment on the application for Greenwich. Council comment. So we'll look for that motion to continue.
Motion to
Councilor
continue.
Cornthal
Mhm.
and seconded by Councilor Engelhardt. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. So that was another demonstration of the organization of our clerk's office. Thank you. And we'll be seeing these applications come back. Probably will require a little more time and effort and discussion November 23rd. We now move on to items 5B and 5C, which I'm going to link together. These are both second readings to extend the amendments of two town ordinances attended with the intent to assist Main Street business operations during the restrictions imposed by the COVID pandemic. The amended ordinances relate to the serving of alcoholic beverages, off-street parking, and provisions of the historic district zoning. Both of these ordinance amendments were adopted back in July, and they're set to expire November 30th. So in order to continue them to a later date, we're going to need to have 3 readings to extend those amendments. Tonight, we have a second reading and a public hearing to extend their effective dates from November 30th, 2020 to March 31st, 2021. So the ordinances are 5B, an ordinance to amend the code of the town of East Greenwich, Chapter 260, entitled Zoning, extend the effective date of the prior amendments to November 30th, from November 30th, 2020 to May 31st, 2021. So I'd ask for a motion to extend the dates on that ordinance.
Was that a question mark about the end about the dates? I wasn't sure.
No, the dates will be to extend it from November 30th, 2020 to May 31st, 2021.
Yeah, I just
We
couldn't
will
hear
ask for public comment.
the audio. So moved.
Isn't this a public hearing, second reading?
Yes, we will ask for public comment. I'm sorry. So we have a motion seconded by Councilor Engelhardt. We'll now open up to public comment. And anyone have any comment on this ordinance extension? If not, council comments? So we have a motion and a second.
President
Yes,
Schwager,
yes.
I don't know if I heard it correctly, but the motion really should be to approve on second reading and schedule for third reading on November 23rd. You muted.
You muted, Mark.
Hit the magic button.
I'm sorry. So we'll amend the motion to reflect the wording suggested by our town clerk. And so we've asked for public input, council comments. We have our motion and a second. So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. We'll now consider item 5C. This is an ordinance to amend the code of the town of East Greenwich entitled Alcoholic Beverages to extend the effective date of the prior amendments from November 30th, 2020 to May 31st, 2021. So we'll ask for public comment on this ordinance. Council comment. So we'll look for a motion to move this from second reading to third reading. When would that be, Lee?
November 23rd.
November 23rd.
So moved.
For motion, we have a motion from Councilor Donegan and second from Councilor Cornthal. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. Peter, did you have a comment? No?
Public comment?
Yeah, I think we asked on public comment. Did we go through that, Lee? Ask for public comment?
Did
Yeah. Okay. This brings us to items 5D and 5E. These are similar items. They're transfers of alcoholic beverage licenses from one owner to a new owner who's taking over these businesses. So I'm going to read the application and then ask our town clerk just to clarify what happens when an alcoholic beverage license is transferred from one owner to the next. So we have 5D. This is an application for transfer of corporate ownership for Class B alcoholic beverage license with Fiddling from Natalie's Italian Marketplace in Delhi, doing business as Natalie's Italian Marketplace, and Delhi to B&B Doing Food Incorporated. And that is a transfer of that license. Lee, what is happening in that circumstance?
So basically, it's a transfer of corporate ownership. The business, it's not a transfer of location. The business is staying right where it is, thank goodness. Basically, the current owners that are running the Natalie's Italian Marketplace Deli Inc. are selling it off to a new corporation, B&B Doing Food Inc. So it has been advertised, the state has been put on notice. The application is in order as far as I'm concerned. Typically, transfers are issued or are granted and not issued for up to a period of 30 days to allow for the State Division of Taxation to clear the existing corporation of any debts that it may have. But I'm 99.9% confident that that's going to happen because I've already seen that they have been cleared on the tax portal for as far as renewals is concerned. So basically just a motion to approve it, subject to meeting all legal requirements would be sufficient.
Thank you for that detail. Is there any public input? This is a public hearing. Any public input into this application for the transfer of the beverage license, alcoholic beverage license? Seeing no public input, council comment. So I'll look for a motion as worded by the town clerk. Council Corenthal makes the motion.
Seconded.
Seconded by Council Donegan. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. Item 5E is a similar transfer. This is transfer of capital stock from Class B alcoholic beverage license with Fiddling from MML SAJK Incorporated, doing business as the patio, from Ken Blue and Angel Winpenny to Angel Winpenny. So Lee, if you want to give us a little summary on this, I see that Angel Winpenny is on the Zoom call. So if the applicant would like to comment, they can be welcome to do so in a moment. Lee, do you have any background for us?
Yes, also, Dean Natalie was also is still on the line. I'm not sure if he wanted to speak or not, but I do see that he is there.
Yes.
Unless he's happy with the way that I've taken care of that. Same thing with this one. This is a transfer of capital stock. So basically, when they first applied to do business in East Greenwich, it was a partnership, well, not a partnership, but there was two people involved in the corporation, and basically Angel bought Ken out, and now she is the sole officer of this corporation. So we have to make sure that we document that as such. It's the patio, it's the same place. Everybody knows where it is, and the application is in order. Same thing would apply. You could grant it, not issue it for up to 30 days of taxation.
Thank you. So this is a public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to comment on the application for this transfer of alcoholic beverage license? Seeing no comment, council questions?
I have one.
Yes.
Mark, I was just asking our solicitor, Peter, could you comment just on what we do to look into corporate background transfer, any of that? What is our role in this?
By statute, only certain entities are allowed to hold their liquor license. And if it's a corporation that holds a liquor license and there's a 50% stock transfer, that's follows the same procedure as if it was transferred to a new entity. So it's just treated as if it's going to a new entity.
Okay.
And generally with all liquor licensing, it's just to ensure that the new holder of the license would comply with state and local regulations, and that you have no reason to doubt that.
Okay, and so is that an independent inquiry we make, or how does that work?
Well, there's a presumption that since it does create a property interest, that they're entitled to alienate that through transfer. But in most cases, it's largely perfunctory, provided they provide the required paperwork, such as the liquor liability insurance, make sure all that is still in order. You could look into it independently if you had a reason to, but if there is no reason to, it's really just a matter of getting the right forms in, getting the certificate of taxation and such.
Okay, and that's sufficient. The only reason I ask is the first round we ever did of these things, you look at things in the corporations that we're transferring, like you check on them and we're not sure they exist. I wasn't when I looked at the state, like I didn't know if we do any of that as a matter of course.
I know that this is, I did check on and I know Lee did too, checked on the Secretary of State's corporations portal.
Okay.
And it's all checked out.
Okay, great. Thanks. That was my only question.
President Schwager,
Yes.
I know I've talked an awful lot, but I think I forgot to say one important thing about these renewals and these transfers. All of the renewals are based on the existing capacity and parking regulations that we have already approved for this year. To my knowledge, and nobody has requested or gotten approval for any sort of capacity change. That would have all had to have gone through the zoning board, and Ernie Marinaro, as the zoning official, is involved in this approval process. So I just wanted to make that point.
I appreciate that. And I think you had mentioned to me that if somebody does want to change their capacity, their zoning capacity, they can do that at any time by going through the zoning board at a future date. So on this transfer that we have on the table here, we asked for public input. Is there anybody from the public or Angel Winpenny, whether you would like to speak? We have an opportunity for public comment at this time. Seeing no public comment, are there any council comments? So I'll ask for a motion to approve this application for transfer of alcoholic beverage license.
Moved.
We have a motion from Councilor Cornthal, seconded by Councilor Engelhardt and Donegan. And so I'll take the roll call. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. Mr. Natalie, I apologize. I didn't see you there when we were discussing your application. It has been approved. Do you have any other additional comments to make on your application? If not, we will go on to item 6. This is new business. And item 6 tonight is quarterly financial update through October 31st, 2020 for fiscal year 2021. As part of our Town Council rules and guidelines, we do present quarterly reports for review by the council. And this is our opportunity to look at the first quarter, and we also actually have the month of October to review as well. So we have with us our finance director, Trish Sunderland. I'm going to ask our manager to provide some context. Mr. Nada did send a memo with some important points related to this first quarter budget review. So Mr. Nada, why don't you take us through that?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Dr. Schwager. So I'd like to take a moment, and I apologize for getting it out late. Just been really distracted on a lot of different things that we've been working on, and Trish had put together the spreadsheets that you're looking at tonight. And I thought just kind of pulling those together in a summary over a couple of pages, nothing that formal, but would give you some perspective as to how we're looking at this first quarterly report. So, and I think it's important everybody sets kind of our expectations appropriately. So, and it's a good report. So that makes it a lot easier than it being a challenging report. But you know, where we stand at this moment, there are a number of challenges that we have that we're up against in getting and really being able to project out and estimate kind of where we're going to be as we continue through this fiscal year. So this is a little more than a quarterly report. We needed a little extra time, and we're able to push this out to 4 months. Normally it ends at the end of September, but we pushed this out statistically with the information that you have on the expenditures and revenue estimates and projections through the end of October. But there are 4 things that are really still challenging us in terms of kind of where we're going to go. And so the first is that we're still focused on the fact that we don't have a state budget. The second, and clearly we're getting closer to that with discussion of, with the recent election of an appointment of a new House Speaker, with the election just having concluded, and with things starting to move forward slowly. We hope that the legislature will be kind of back in session fairly soon, having previously talked about really tackling and taking on this budget issue in the state, especially in concert with the November Revenue Estimating Conference that just concluded. So reports have yet to be issued, but I think by all accounts, numbers are still looking good coming out of that report, which will play right in and be a key factor in any deliberation that the legislature and the governor's office have on the formulation of an FY21 formal budget. So the second piece would be the lack of any clear direction or clarity that we have on, because of the lack of a budget, on municipal pass-through or appropriated aid or education aid. What you're going to look at tonight on the municipal side is absolutely reliant. It's reliant on the fact that we will see all of our state aid, and as well as the school committee's quarterly budget assessment that they issued in October, which was good through the end of September, is also relying on the fact that their expectation is that they're going to receive a full allotment of state aid as projected. So the third item is the uncertainty associated with revenue and expenditure categories that have been modified due to present service needs. And so what I mean by that is a couple of different things. So what I mean by that is that the FY21 budget is a restructured budget. We did it a little bit differently than customarily had been the practice. We decentralized and we separated out all of our personnel and benefit costs into individual departments. We also separated out services like our fleet maintenance and repairs that were previously all housed in the Public Works Department budget for all departments. Those now reside, those line item expenditure accounts now reside within the individual department, as well as all of our building maintenance line items. So what that's going to do for us on a go-forward basis is we'll be able to look in each of those categories, whether or not it's public safety or fleet maintenance or personnel costs or whatever it might be. We're going to be able to tie those all to the cost associated with an individual service. So we'll be able to know exactly how much providing public safety in the community costs, fire and EMS services, recreation and parks and senior services, finance, town clerk's office, whatever it might be. So on a go-forward basis, it's going to be like our own chart of accounts, be much easier to compare with other communities once the state has that system set up, and we'll be able to really use that as a barometer go forward. So for this year, when you look back, it's a little more difficult to compare and contrast unless you break out the costs and reflect them in a similar way. So that's another challenge. And really the last is just also in dealing with some of the modifications to COVID and addressing some of the expenses associated with that. So what I did in this report is you flip to the second page, as you'll see, we did add just a few things to ground the conversation. We included our most recent FEMA reimbursement submittals. These are all COVID-related costs for the town and school department. So that gives you an indication as what's been submitted. We've only had one, really the smallest request that's been acted upon. So basically my point is we have no idea yet as to what is going to be deemed eligible for reimbursement. Note that's 75% reimbursement. So just in that one particular example, we're looking at almost $170,000 in municipal costs on the town and the school side for a potential of just over $125,000 in reimbursement, but so far we've received $4,500. So it's going to be some time, and there's a question as to whether or not we're going to see that reimbursement in FY21, or it might even be extended further than that. So second to that is another item that we think we've really started to invest a tremendous amount of time, and we think it's starting to pay off, is in our grant writing, looking for additional support. And so wanting, because that list can get away from you over time. So I think it's important to keep it out in front of us. And so I think this is very indicative of the real dollars that are being generated by various departments that are assisting us at a time when we absolutely need it, when there's so much uncertainty that we're able to backfill numerous capital equipment and programmatic needs that we have with these grant funds, and whether or not there's a match or not, we're able to match those at pennies on the dollar versus what we would have to fund initially. So, and the other piece is, and what I didn't include in that short list, there was one that I left off that Joe Duarte and I worked through the numbers this afternoon. One is that we did also secure over another $90,000 for energy efficiency projects. So we had received over $63,000 from National Grid Incentives. We received another $33,000 from the Department of Energy Resources and Incentive, and the town matched that with about $90,000. So we received about $187,000 in energy efficiency improvements with the car charging station over at 111 Pierce, and as well as other improvements at the police station, town hall, and other buildings. So that $186,000 cost us about $90,000. So we can add that to the list. I just came across that this afternoon. But we also wanted to include grants that we've applied for and haven't received. So there's some other major grants that are out there. That $900,000 grant, which was through the Assistance to Firefighters grant, that was the 3 years of funding for 3 firefighter positions over that period of time. Benefits. So we were unsuccessful in that request, but I think it's important to see it. And unfortunately, we just got word today that we were unsuccessful in our very recent $60,000 request to the Rhode Island Foundation, which was to provide additional economic development support as well as human service support for substance abuse prevention and mental health counseling, bringing various professionals into the community for presentations, some other grassroots efforts, and some groundwork in the community in that particular area, as well as a number of other related support subjects. But we have a very good relationship with the Rhode Island Foundation, and they're aware of our interest, and so they know that we'll be a future applicant for those particular programs. So, that in summary, there's a lot of moving pieces. I'd like to kind of pause for a second. I'm going to ask, Trish put together these 2 major spreadsheets that we have, one which breaks down in summary form all of our expenditures per categorical area, such as the manager's office, legal services, finance, information technology, parks and recreation, senior and human services, public safety, public works, planning, fire department, community services, and parks and recreation, town hall operations, and our capital outlay. And you're able to get a good perspective in what these 2 do for us. That's the expenditure side. And Trish did a job in keeping it as simple as possible at this early stage to give you a perspective on, what was adopted, any transfers that have since been made, what our revised FY21 budget is at just under $21,400,000 on the municipal side, combining the actuals with the encumbrances. So far, we've spent about $8,000, and about 8 million thus far, leaving a balance of a little over 13 million available for expenditures. So, we've spent thus far a little over 30%, 35%. So we've got a significant amount that's left there to be spent. And I think, we could dive into any other nuances, although I think with some of the facets of the budgetary changes that we've made, where departments are getting used to those changes, as well as the uncertainty associated with the state aid, as well as the reimbursement on some of the COVID-related expenditures. The expenditure side is really leaving us with an estimate at this early stage of over a $400,000 surplus. So I think the effort that we put into FY21 in terms of our staffing reduction, in terms of strategic decisions that we've made thus far in terms of not filling some positions that are funded but that remain unfilled for as long as we possibly can until it really becomes necessary for us to fill those positions, is starting to create the type of surplus that we were hoping for as some leverage, right? And as a hedge against the potential loss in state aid and other revenues should we see a downturn in the second, third, fourth quarter of the year. Now, combined with that expenditure side, I'm just going to quickly hit it, and I'm going to ask Trish to kind of run through any highlights that you'd like to bring to your attention. Is when you look on the revenue side, I think the same thing is happening where incredibly we're strong in some areas of revenue generation, much more so than we would have anticipated, such as prior year taxes. Where right now we're looking at an over of approximately a little over $400,000. So of the estimated $900,000 in projected revenue overage, combined with the $400,000 in expenditure reduction, we're presently looking at about a $1.3 million surplus as of today, 4 months in. So a lot can change. But as you look through those revenue lines and you compare that October 31, 2019 to the October 31, 2020, they're able to get a sense as to where things are somewhat strong at this particular stage and where things are a little we're unsure of. And so, but I think we really had no alternative, and Trish and her projections really utilized the fact that I mentioned this a few minutes ago about the fact that we had to rely on the fact that we were going to get the state aid. So should that change, we'll appropriately be ready for the modification. But I want to just have, before we get into the details, just so you could digest it, and I did include those figures on the expenditure and revenue totals in the initial summary, and it's something we don't want to get overly excited about. We're cautiously optimistic. It's only the end of October, beginning of November, but this is a good place to be, and I think it's where we wanted to be based on some of the changes that we made to this year's budget that was just so uncertain and was so many pieces were changing at the time that it was ultimately approved in late June. So I know Trish is on the line. And Trish, do you want to kind of walk through on, at least in terms of how you formulate your estimates and the trending that you conducted in the various accounts, which brought us to that 400,000+ in expenditure reserve and a little over 900,000 in terms of revenue generation at this particular point?
Good evening.
Hi, Trish.
Hey, how are you? Wendy, can you put up the revenues spreadsheet?
Sorry, Trish, you said the revenue?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Trish, your audio is a little muddied. I don't know if there's anything you can do.
How's that?
Good.
My speakers are all the way up, so I'm not really sure what might be going on.
Okay.
It's a little better. Yep.
So what I've prepared for you here is a summary of the revenues. And you'll see at the bottom of the page, I'm projecting a $908,000 surplus as of October 31st. And this is based on the trending through October 31st compared to what we received last year at this time. So if you look on the spreadsheet, what I do is I look at the 2019 actuals, and then I trend that to where we are today, October 31st, based on where we were last October 31st. So my assumptions and my projected over short column, the column to the right, takes into consideration my total revenues plus what we've collected after October 2020, fiscal year 2020. So what you'll see is, for instance, in the current year tax revenue, as of October 31st, we collected $17 million. I'm taking the last year's levy, where we were at 29.6%. And this year, where we are in October, is 29.68%. So I'm coming up with an estimated fee of 98.08. And this year during audit, we're having an unaudited figure of about 98%. So that's where we're trending right now. We don't plan on changing any of our policies, procedures internally. We're going to be doing our delinquent taxes, our notices, staying the course. If you go down to the prior year taxes, the next line item, I'm projecting a $421,000 surplus. How I got there is, as of October 31st, 2020, we had received $859,000. I'm estimating that we're going to be receiving the $512 that we collected after October last year. So the actual of $859 plus $512 minus the $950 for what we budgeted brings us to $421,000. So those are trends that I've used throughout, except the areas in the state aid to education and all of our state revenues. I don't use those trends because those are pretty much known figures from the information that we get out of the state. Of course, this year is a little bit different because we don't have an adopted budget yet, but the trends that I'm projecting there, they are conservative. Assuming we're going to continue to get our monthly allowances, but again, it's too preliminary to determine whether or not those will be our final numbers. We really won't know that until after the governor adopts the budget. I don't know if there's any questions on that new page.
No, I was just curious, Trish, is there anything that sort of caught you by surprise? Was there anything that you were unexpected in the revenue side of this budget?
Well, I'm happy to see that our current year tax collection rate is up.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good news at this point. But there again, we really don't know what COVID is going to bring us in the later part of the year. We don't know about unemployment if this continues on. So that's actually really good news for us at this point, that our collection rate is up. The fire department revenues and rescue revenues are down a bit, and that seems to be people are not heading to the hospitals. I think when I had a conversation with the chief, they're making less runs to St. Elizabeth's that they had been earlier on before COVID hit. So other than that, our revenues are up for in public works for our building permits. Maybe people are staying home doing their to-dos that they didn't get to while they're working full time. But that was quite interesting what's going on in the public works permits. Out of that, real estate conveyance, that's just driven by the market.
Yeah.
Interest rates are still low. People are refinancing. We have a lot of sales. We're doing MLCs, crazy MLCs, probably 10 every day at least.
Wow.
But outside of that, things are looking pretty good, but I'm pretty optimistic right now.
Yay. Oh, good. All right, cool. Thank you.
Trish?
Yes.
It looks like I would have expected the meals and beverage tax to be wildly off. I mean, that's off by probably 25%. I don't know, what's that number?
Yeah.
But that's kind of encouraging. What do you make of that? What's behind those numbers? Is that encouraging or discouraging?
On that, yeah, so what's behind the numbers is I'm still considering that we'll receive the 400,000 that we collected after October 2020. But again, that's one of the numbers that we really don't have a good handle on because we don't know what the next half of the year is going to bring us.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Welcome. If there's no other questions on that, we can look at the summary page, Wendy, for expenses.
Got it?
Great, perfect. So again, what you're looking at here are the surplus and few deficits, the departmental functions. This is based on what we're doing right now at this time. We've got some vacancies that have still remained vacant until basically we hear from the state. There's nothing really glaring in this analysis. My estimated column basically takes into consideration the number of pay periods for salary and benefits we still have left in the fiscal year. Just some known expenses. We have some estimates on the winter, what's going to happen for the winter. Too early to predict, which has been a common theme over the past week. But anyway, so we're looking like we'll have a $430,000 surplus on the expenditure side. And so adding the two, the surplus and revenues, surplus and expenditures, brings us to an estimated $1.3 million, but it's too early to tell.
Chris, Trish, what is general insurance?
Oh, that's our property liability insurance. So as you know, we did not get a quote from our previous provider. The only quote we did receive was from the trust this year. Property liability insurance, I believe, had been budgeted on the lower end anyway, so the beginning budget was low. So that includes property liability insurance plus workers' comp.
And I think the other piece to that, Trish, is the fact that, as the months are going on, we're finding that there were some significant assets that the town had that were not, did not have coverage on it. So we're going through revising our asset plans and making sure that everything is accounted for and everything is appropriately covered as it should be. Just in case that includes in-ground tanks that we have, fuel tanks and everything else that you can imagine, and making sure our vehicles are all covered. Over time, it's very easy for some of those lists to get dated. So we have all of our departments right now working very closely with the trust to make sure everything has the appropriate coverage moving forward.
So there were actually assets that we had, town-owned property that was not covered by insurance at all, that had never been covered, or?
Yeah, I'm not sure of the history on how far back we're new, but there were several items that did not have coverage. Yeah, both buildings. As an example, the training facility behind Station 2. So there's a value to that asset. That training facility did not have any coverage whatsoever. Certain vehicles that we had, some emergency response vehicles, just due to the turnover. It's the constant replacement and changeover, and some of the record keeping over time had just not been updated. So we're coming across that. And then I think various assets out in the field regarding certain pieces of compounds that we have, such as certain ball fields that have certain assets. We want to make sure that they're all appropriately covered. So we've actually significantly modified our coverage to make sure that we were appropriately, that's what the cost is really stemming from, is that change, just to make sure we had all the appropriate coverages that we needed.
Wow. Oh, but I mean, it's fascinating, and thank you so much for catching it before.
I have a question.
Mr. Donegan.
Trish, Andy, I don't know who fields this question, but I could ask this question in sort of an oblique general way, but it won't probably yield a specific answer. So I'm going to give you the specific example. Since our school committee has written a field trip policy that has resulted in some activities, one of which I was heavily involved with, the Model UN, overnight trips being run outside of the schools. And what that means is that had it been a school field trip, then by state law, those parents who kind of run the trips are indemnified for ordinary negligence.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't exist now when those parents get involved. Do you know, is there a way to, like, I don't know if, for instance, we don't own the library, but we insure it probably. I don't know if we do, or we just pay the money. Is there any way that we could, that some activity like that, that's really students and residents, could apply in any way to get, either have those parents be insured, or in any way bring it under our umbrella that everyone who decides that they're taking children to, New York, for instance, I'll give you my example. You're not just running for luck if somebody goes out in the street or if something bad happens, just because it wasn't falling within the four corners of the field trip policy.
Trish, let me try to take this one on and pull me back if I go astray. So yeah, so Mike, in my experience over the years working with the trust, my understanding on a volunteer, a recognized volunteer, so a department head, a supervisory person, an administrator in the town, I can recognize an individual as a volunteer for the community. That volunteer would be indemnified and protected by the trust. So I think what you're getting at is that the Model UN program as an educational program does not necessarily have to be managed through the school district, and could be managed like any other public education or recreational program that we offer in the community. And there's a fee associated with participating in that program.
Mm-hmm.
And you or others as volunteer instructors are managing that program. You're not being paid for it. And ultimately, you would be in that model protected. Now, clearly, we can verify that with one phone call to the trust, but it also comes into play where you might have an individual who we recognize who's a gardener and they love taking care of town hall grounds. And as long as we officially recognize them as a volunteer, historically, in my experience over 30 years and working with the trust, those individuals are covered.
And so they're not, are they indemnified by the city or just covered by the insurance, or both?
I believe that both, but I'll be happy to confirm that for you.
Okay,
Yeah.
because right now what's happening is, I've passed on that activity to other parents.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just kind of running for luck with it because we had to, it just happened. But I know that there's going to be some reticence, and this will carry through for all other such activities.
Yeah.
And so maybe if you could look into that and we could schedule it on some agenda. I don't want to take up too much time here. We're just talking about insurance.
Sure.
It would be helpful. I think that would be helpful to a lot of our students and allow them to have the bandwidth of a lot of many of the programs that are kind of being run in a parallel circumstance now, if that's doable.
Yeah, understood. Be happy to do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question, and I hate to throw cold water on all this because that surplus is really lovely, but I don't think I'm going out on a limb here by saying the school costs must be astronomical. The school costs for personnel alone I'm guessing is I don't know when we're gonna talk about that, but that's gotta be, that's something obviously we're gonna have to deal with at some point.
Yes.
And I don't know, and I know we're working on getting some information from RIDE. But
We are. So Karen, did you happen to see on October 6th, the superintendent, who happens to be on the line tonight, I believe, actually presented to the school committee a quarterly financial update. So that was as of the end of September. So on October 6th, and I'm happy to get that information and forward it to the council. I didn't in anticipation of this because this was not a school budget discussion.
right.
But I think within those records, there's a comprehensive breakdown, kind of like on the detailed expenditure line item that we have, that shows that through the end of September, the school was recognizing expenses a little over 33 point, let me see, expenses, encumbrance, they still had an available, a little over 6 million. They had encumbrances of about 2.5 million. So they were still out of a $42.1 million budget program. They still had available about 33.6 million. So they had spent about 20%. But again, that factors in, similar to what we did, the expectation that you're going to have the full $42 million budget and you're going to have state aid. The other thing that was included on that same meeting was that individual spreadsheet, which is a tracking of COVID expenses thus far for the school. And in that, I happen to have it in front of me. In that presentation, they've got a total in estimated expenses of, let's see, believe about let me see, about different subtotals. So you've got under personnel is about 390,000, under facilities and materials just over $1 million. In transportation, it's about 140,000. Then you've got some distance learning costs totaling it out about little over $1.5 million. So in addition to that, off on the right-hand column, they've got some notes that provide some additional information to provide some detail on some of those expenditures, and then an estimate on some revenue sources that they would have to reallocate from, such as a reserve of about $500,000, housing aid of about 328,000, and other CRF funds and housing aid funds for a total of a little over $1 million. So that's kind of where they're tracking at this point. And I think, I think what the school still lacks, similar to the town, is that we don't yet have clear guidance on what of those funds is going to be reimbursable. Now, these are all COVID-related expenses and actions that were prompted by regulations through RIDE to implement to get the schools open. So one would think, reasonable person would think, the majority of those expenses, if not all of them, should be reimbursable through the CRF funds for the mandates through RIDE and the governor's office to reopen schools. So the superintendent and others, to my knowledge, don't yet have that commitment. So I think we're waiting to hear that. And I think the rest of the budget, quarterly budget presentation put forward by the school is really just, again, as ours is predicated on the fact of receiving their full state aid. So I think your follow-up question of when would be a good time to start to really talk about this would probably be at our December meeting, our joint meeting in December, where that would give both of us the ability to maybe update these figures through November. And so we're getting close to a mid-year point where hopefully we'll have probably not a state budget, but at least some movement towards one, where maybe we'll be able to get some commitments. And so I'm hoping by mid-December, we can have a much more educated discussion for both the municipal and the school side financially as to kind of where we stand at this point.
Yeah, it's very tough.
Definitely.
And would you anticipate personnel costs being covered by RIDE as part of a COVID expense?
Would really depend on what prompted it. So if to have a healthy environment, there were additional supports that were necessary because of the spacing of students, potentially some special services provided for some distance learning or certain populations that required certain attention, some of the transportation costs that were incurred. So potentially, you know, we're not successfully seeing those requests be made with FEMA, but the CRF funds are a completely different funding source. And so I think that, and through public education, I think there's a good chance that some of those mandated actions that the school had to take to reopen schools, I would hope would be reimbursable when the day comes to an end here sometime in the next year. But again, also comes down to when you receive the funding. So we don't really know yet when that's going to happen. And the CRF funds, just to reiterate that the 1.25 billion, which is now probably down to 600 or 700 million that's left, expires at the end of December. So unless there's a change in the regulations through the federal government on those funds between now and then, whatever the state does not spend legitimately by the end of December will have to be turned back. Doesn't mean you won't see a new stimulus to make up for it in the coming months after that. But I think that's why there's a lot of pressure right now from many municipalities and school districts just to try to get an understanding as to what commitment will be made through the legislature and the governor's office to commit to funding some of these legitimate COVID expenses that have been incurred all over the
How
state.
likely is it that the state will allow that to expire and we would lose that money? I mean, how stupid would that be?
That's a real kind of a loaded question, Renew. I'm happy to answer it, but I might.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Renew, are you starting a stand-up routine? I don't know. How stupid would it be?
Yeah. There's a lot of people asking that same question, Renew, and I think there are legitimate ways, if you ever have a few moments and you want to read the CRF regulations relative to what's eligible, there are ways the money can be spent. The question is, how do you do it equitably? It can't still be used for backfilling revenue shortfalls, right? So there's certain pieces to it. That's why that November revenue estimating conference is so important, because for some reason, and there's terrific news to be had at a time when there isn't a lot of good news. Well, the good news in Rhode Island is our deficit is much less than what it had been anticipated, but there are different ways people describe the deficit. Some still have it in that 700 plus or minus $1 million range. Others have it in the $300 to $400 million range. And depending on where it falls and based on how they handle their rainy day reimbursement and how they handle some of their capital program reimbursements and refunding some of the funds they had taken or thought they would have to take to deal with some of these shortfalls, will have a big impact on how the remaining CRF funds get used and how municipalities and school districts make out here. But again, there's so many moving pieces, and I think the first piece was getting through the election. That's one, and which isn't quite over yet, until we get through the certifications. But that's December, right? So that's the end of November in Rhode Island into December, and then after that, so we're talking the mid-year point before we really, or later, before we really start to get an idea. So it's an unnerving place to be. But I think if anything tonight, your takeaway is on the municipal side. I think we're solid in terms of how we're providing services and how we're tracking revenues. The local economy in some areas is doing better than anticipated. Other areas it's holding its own, and we hope it stays that way through the rest of the year. And I think the focus is really going to end up on school education aid and what's eligible for reimbursement to address this $1.5 million that the school is anticipating on having to spend. So I think as we focus, I think there'll be a lot of questions associated with that in December when we have our joint meeting.
Well, I guess other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, the play is excellent.
Well, at least we're in a surplus.
Wendy, are you able to take down the slide? Yeah, and we can see each other back again. I guess I would just comment that, when we put this budget together back in April, May, June, we were really in a very difficult situation. We really didn't know what the future would bring. And we had asked our manager and our finance director to put together a very conservative budget, which gave us the resources to respond to an unknown challenge going forward. And it really is apparent that that they've done that. I mean, tonight we see that they've hit the mark as far as providing us with the resources to be able to respond. I mean, the challenges we have is the decrease on the expenses. We had some position reductions. We have not filled positions. We have not used our capital outlay. That's a short-term solution. That's not a long-term solution. And on the revenue side, as Trish Sunderland had mentioned, we assume we were going to get full revenues from the state, and neither of those things are guaranteed. So we are in as good a position as we can be, and we have successfully put in the plan that we put into place is successfully implemented at this point. So I think there's a lot of credit due to the finance department, Trish and Gina Krakowski, the other members of the department, our manager. I also would comment that just as the clerk's department really undertook a major revision of town policy with the e-licensing, the finance department has also undertaken some major revisions in our budgeting that are really something, you know, having been around town government for a while, this is something that's been talked about for years, and it now is in effect, which is allocating expenses by department and really getting an accurate idea of what departments are costing us, allocating healthcare costs, vehicles, fuel, other expenses, giving us a much clearer picture. So in the short time that that Trish and Andy have been aboard, they've really delivered changes to town government, which are not glamorous and are not high profile, but are really just very good government and are really going to serve the residents of the community. So thank you for all those efforts.
Mark, if I could ask one question on the.
Yes, Mr. Donegan.
I was following up on your comment in the earlier discussion about how we're allocating expenses and revenues. Andy, I was just wondering, when we get a grant, let's say it's for the fire department or some activities of the fire department, does that get credited to them? I know they author the grant, they work with the town, but they do that work. Because I know in the past we saw where it might show up as, we had an example a couple of years ago where it showed up where they were working overtime. True, but we weren't paying it. That was a federal grant that was funding it. So it kind of didn't show up as fire department revenue. It just said, what are you doing running the overtime? But it was really free and income to, you know, so I just don't know how we account for that and if that's properly considered when we look at the total cost for a department.
Trish, I don't know if I want to handle it. That's a little bit of a different question, Mike. Most of the grants that we receive for departments are typically asset related. Typically they're equipment or an item, but I would say the one department and at times prior grants like for SRO officers in the school system and others would actually fund personnel. So Trish, my understanding is that you would show the revenue if it was personnel related to offset the expense.
We wouldn't funnel that through the operating budget. That's not good practice because then we commingle funds. So what we would do is we would recognize that in a special revenue fund, either federal grant fund or state grant fund. That way it's easier for us to account for it with the auditors.
Yeah.
And if we are paying any personnel expenses, we would charge it off there. So we recognize the revenues and the expenses. But if it's just for equipment, we would expense it from the operating budget and then we would credit it back when the revenues come in.
Yeah.
But would it be, but I guess what I'm saying is if we ever had a discussion, so year over year, cost of running a department, but there's $100,000 of grant money that we got that really assisted us. I know our budget number would just be down, right? Because we spent 100 less. Is that the only way it's reflected, or do we, is it required that we have sort of look to you to inform us that part of the reason it was down 100,000 in expenses is because the work that this department did and our town staff did in applying for these grants and securing them? I just wonder how we capture that, because it's, you know, I think we're getting real money that matters to us and our taxpayers, and I don't want it to get lost when we look at those things.
I think you'd have to look at the way the grant was written, to be honest with you, but I'm not sure why you would recognize overtime in the operating budget if you were being reimbursed for it.
Right. I just recall a time in the past where that's how it was presented as a narrative. And so, I'm just wondering at the end of the day, when I look at a budget at the end of the year or quarterly, if there are grants that are being secured, how someone like me who won't be looking at all the, I don't know where that gets captured.
Well, no, I think, isn't she saying that under Trish, she would account for it properly?
Correct.
Maybe
Right.
that was the problem.
History here. We're doing a good job not repeating history here and being transparent and appropriated where they belong and recognizing the expenses where they belong.
Yeah.
Doing a good job at that. I promise you that. So going back to your question though, if we did get a grant and the grant, the terms and conditions of the agreement was to recognize some overtime costs related to the grant work, that's probably supplemental information that we would provide you with. For
Yes.
instance, the outside initiative.
Right.
So part of the overtime in that grant, correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, was $10,000 of overtime. So we would recognize $10,000 in the grant fund for overtime expense. And then the rest obviously is booked to the operating budget.
Yeah, I think accounting wise, Mike, we have to show it that way, but I think in budget discussions, we'd have to introduce it just to make sure everyone was aware of it. Very similar to the grant that we were not successful in for those 3 firefighters at over 3 years, about 100,000 in terms of salary and benefits. So that would have probably fallen into the special reserve revenue account that Trish was noting. We would have funded it separately, but we would have still been engaging because at the end of that timed 3-year period, we would have, because that was involved in their existing number of firefighters in their CBA, we would have eventually had to have brought that back into the operating budget at some point. So, yeah.
Right. So if you could then, for those of us, when we look at financial statements, and I don't forget this moment in time where we got these grants, if you could just remind us when we analyze these that, oh, by the way, in these numbers, it'll be easy if once a year you tell us, but as we look at them and they're relevant, it would be helpful to remind us, because I know when we looked at hiring a chief, we spent no small amount of time testing his grant writing ability and effort and all of that. And I just think that should be reflected as we talk about money, not just in one, how did the town do generally?
Yes. Yeah. You bet.
Thank you.
Of course.
Other questions related to the quarterly financial update? That was a very good presentation, and I assume we'll take up the conversation when we meet with the school committee in December with updated numbers. So we'll move on from item 6. Item 7 is public comment. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to make a comment at this time? Seeing none, that takes us to item 8, council announcements and comments. I would like to add one council announcement. We would have to get a motion in to add it. I just want to have the opportunity for the public to be informed of our Veterans Day celebration on Wednesday, and maybe Lee can tell us a little bit about what's happening at that time. There's been a lot of time and effort in that regard, and we're one of the few communities that still does the annual veterans recognition. So can I ask for a motion to add to council announcements, or I'd like to make a motion to add to council announcements discussion of the Veterans Day celebrations?
Only if it involves Lee describing it. Second.
The motion in a second. Lee has decided she has reached her word limit for the evening, but we'll see if we can
Sick of me yet? Oh my.
Lee, you are always welcome to say your piece
Never.
anytime. So
Well,
all
this
those
is
in
my
favor?
favorite topic, so.
All those in favor to adding
I
that?
love you talking about this topic.
Aye, the motion carries 4-0. So I think the best person to express the events in East Greenwich would be our town clerk, Lee Carney.
Okay, great. So yes, we are going forward with our annual Veterans Day Parade. It's a COVID compliant event. We are asking for full compliance with the groups and the spectators who have a mile or so of roadways to find a nice, excuse me, a nice spot to spread out. Speaking of COVID compliant, sorry.
Didn't say that.
It's going to be great. We have, invitations were limited, but we have a great response so far. It'll be smaller. We're going to have a great day. I asked my dear friend Carl in heaven to make the weather change, and that happened. So we're going to have a beautiful sunny morning. Yeah, it's going to be great. So I'm going to try to get there early and greet the groups at Academy Field like I always do. Ask them, make sure everybody's covered up and maintain some distance within their groups and between groups. It's been promoted to as more of a vehicular parade. So you might see a lot more of that. And also because we didn't hire any bands for obvious reasons, we're asking folks that are participating to, maybe play some amplified patriotic music to kind of spice it up a little bit. Again, this is the more of a solemn day. So, no, I'm sorry. Memorial Day is the solemn day. This is the celebration day for our veterans. So I say to all those that plan on participating, bring your red, white, and blue, bring your flags out, bring your masks, and I think we're going to have a great day. It's going to kick off at 10 o'clock and probably end up by 11 o'clock in front of Town Hall. There'll be, I'm sorry to say for you folks, no reviewing stand, no closing ceremonies for obvious reasons. And then I'm planning on having the groups dissipate at the end here in front of Town Hall. I'll have some go up Courthouse Lane, some will go north on Main Street, and all the vehicles will go down King Street. So yeah, I'm super excited about it. Thank you, Andy, for supporting my wishes to do this, and even in the event of a pandemic. But it's very important that we continue our community events as a ray of hope that East Greenwich is going strong, and we shall lead by example. So.
Well, thank you, Lee. You did mention Captain Carl looking down on you and providing the weather, and you referring to Carl, who was very active, Carl Hoyer, who was very active in the school committee. He was on the school committee, he was on the town council for many years, was in charge of this parade for many years, took Lee under his wing, and Lee has continued the tradition, and a little bit of Carl lived on Lee with the work that you do. So thank you, and we'll see you on Wednesday.
Enough said.
Enough said. There you go. It's Captain Carl's sign-off line. Are there any other council comments or announcements? Hearing none, we do have an executive session tonight. There are 3 items for executive session, so I'll ask our town clerk to read us into executive session, and we'll vote to move into that session.
Okay, that would be a motion to convene into executive session per Rhode Island General Law 42, 46, 5A2 and 9 for the approval of executive session minutes from September 14th, 2020, and remain in executive session per Rhode Island General Law 42, 46, 5A2 pertaining to litigation, specifically East Greenwich versus Beverage Recycler, Rhode Island, case number KC 2020-0498, and AAD appeal number 20-002/ARE, and also case PC 2020-07066. and also remain in executive session per Rhode Island General Law 4246585 for discussions or considerations related to the disposition of publicly held property wherein advanced public information will be detrimental to the interest of the public.
Thank you. Would someone like to make a motion to convene into executive session? Counselor Donegan,
So moved.
seconded by Counselor Cornthal. All those in favor, raise their hands, please. Motion carries 4-0. So we will leave this meeting, convene at a different Zoom site for the executive session, and then we will reconvene after executive session back at the public Zoom site to conclude our meeting. So I'll see you in executive session.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wendy, can you hear me?
Yes, Dr. Schwager.
Oh, good. I just want to make sure I was in the right place.
So actually, this is the public meeting.